Now, in the latest diplomatic response to the chemical attack in Salisbury, NATO has expelled 7 Russian diplomats from its headquarters in Brussels. 25 countries have now taken similar action, expelling at least 140 diplomats in total. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said Moscow will respond in kind. Well, let's now speak to Yuval Weber, who's a fellow at the Daniel Morgan Graduate School at the Wilson Center, but he also lived in Moscow for 4 years and worked as Associate Economics Professor at the National Research University. He joins us now from Washington. Thanks for being on the program. Clearly, President Putin has got his hands full at home with a very awful situation, tragic situation in Siberia. To what extent is that hampering his initial response to what's happening with the diplomatic expulsions?
Oh, tremendously. In each one of these rounds, both historically and in recent years, mostly from the United States, but also the UK a couple weeks ago, we would have expected Russia to not only respond tit for tat, to do exactly what the US previously or what the UK did, but also to escalate a bit further in order to see just how far the West would go. He's being hamstrung right now by what is a terrible tragedy happening out in Siberia in Kemerovo. At this point, more than 60 victims have been identified, with more than 40 of those being children. So if he tries to essentially pivot back to his core strength of foreign policy, he might be eviscerated sort of domestically. People want him, and I've been checking the Russian news all day, people want him to pay attention and try to solve this domestic tragedy, and that is something that he's relatively less comfortable in doing. He'd rather be doing foreign policy and hitting back against this coalition of Western nations.
And he does feel, as you say, in a position of strength when he's doing that. He's portraying that image at home, as it were, which is a message he feels his electorate want to hear. But what do you think is going to happen in terms of, Moscow's reaction when it does come? I mean, Sergei Lavrov says it will be a strong reaction, which we would expect.
So sure. So from the 2016 election meddling in the United States to whatever that's been proved or not proved, then President Obama expelled 35 Russian diplomats. And what we later found out is the soon-to-be National Security Advisor Michael Flynn told then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to not do anything. That eventually led to, once Michael Flynn left his job, that 755 American positions were eliminated by the Russians. When Theresa May and the UK government expelled 23 Russian diplomats over the Sergei Skripal incident, not only did Russia respond with expelling 23 British diplomats, but they also closed the British Council and the British consulate in St. Petersburg. So what we can expect is at least 2 to 3 of the following. First, every country that expelled the Russian diplomat, they know that this will be responded to tit for tat. So if a country expelled 1, that's probably the number that they figure that they could lose from their Moscow embassy and continue on their activities. So at minimum, Russia will respond in that kind. The United States also closed the Russian consulate in Seattle. So for sure, the Russians will close one of the American consulates. Perhaps, and so there are 3 outside of Moscow, 1 St. Petersburg, 1 in Yekaterinburg, which is sort of in the middle of the country, and 1 in Vladivostok, which is on the Pacific coast of the country. So for sure, given that the United States closed the San Francisco consulate last year, we can expect an American consulate to be closed. And the third thing is essentially what will Russia do in addition to and above the 2 things that I just mentioned, and that's essentially what Russia wants to sort of keep its powder dry and let the West start to worry. Is this going to be violence, cybersecurity stuff, or whatever else?
Okay, Yuval Weber, thank you for your time. We'll have to leave it there.